new bombshell reporting from the Wall Street Journal that might explain why Donald Trump appears so anxious and, frankly, flat-footed when it comes to releasing documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. The Wall Street Journal citing senior administration officials in its reporting that when Justice Department officials reviewed what Attorney General Pam Bondi called a, quote, truckload of documents related to Epstein earlier this year, they discovered Donald Trump's name appeared multiple times.
So in what is turning out to be a very poorly done sequel, this week, the Wall Street Journal is launching yet another hit piece that attempts to tie Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. And it is apparently so bad this time. It is so much worse even than the one we saw last week that in the Wall Street Journal's own words, I kid you not, they said this, their sourcing here comes from quote unquote unverified hearsay, and this is exactly the matter that Democrats and liberals, after doing nothing to release the Epstein Files for 4 years, are trying to be ridiculously bad faith about. They're saying Trump's name is in the Epstein Files. See, we told you, despite the fact it's already been well known and documented. It's been published in both 2024 and 2025 that Trump's name is indeed in the files. The point is he's not on a so-called client list that does not exist. Even in the own words here of the Wall Street Journal, there is no actual evidence of Trump ever having been to the island or involved in any criminal wrongdoing. And this comes in a slew of other media bombshells, quote unquote, hit pieces where they're trying to say, oh, look, see, we told you Trump and Epstein used to be friendly with each other in the 1990s, which I once again come and say, I mean, this is news. This is something we've all known. We also know they had a well-documented falling out, okay? But anyways, we're going to get into all of this coverage here today. I'll tell you about what the media is saying. I'll explain to you why the accusations are fundamentally bad faith and ridiculous. And again, trying to sell you news stories on information that's already been well-documented, okay? They're essentially assuming the ignorance of people who have not really followed this story extensively to know, oh, they're basically actually ironically here doing exactly what Pam Bondi did back in February, which is essentially release information that was already published and already well known and then pretend like it's a bombshell and try to sell it to people. So if Bondi's to blame for the PR disaster that this has been for the Trump administration, the Wall Street Journal and CNN are actually doing the same exact thing for the media. So we'll get into all of that here in today's video. First though, folks, as usual, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. You subscribing here, guys, is not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that we can keep bringing you this great coverage. And with all of that said, so here we go. Let's get into, first of all, I'm going to kind of go through what the media has been doing earlier this week. So first of all, according to CNN, they just launched a bombshell tape this week that shows that Jeffrey Epstein were together at a 1999, back in the 90s, yes, Victoria's Secret fashion show. Apparently, their other new bombshell here is that, quote, we uncovered multiple photos of Jeffrey Epstein at Donald Trump's wedding, photos of the pair together earlier that year at an event, and a video of Epstein and Trump at the 99 Victoria's Secret fashion show. So here you go. You can see them right here. There is Jeffrey Epstein. They're, shaking hands, talking to each other for a brief moment here. And that basically is the total extent of it. Hey, they were sitting in a similar part of the venue there. Okay, so there you have it. And again, the reaction here, utterly ridiculous because their big accusation here is, again, Trump and Epstein used to be friendly with each other. They used to know each other. Yes, that's a known fact, okay? Secondly, the accusation that, oh, he was at his wedding, therefore they're close. I mean, New York resident fellow billionaire Jeffrey Epstein was one of 1,000 people attended Donald Trump's wedding in New York. One of them was Jeffrey Epstein. They were both residents of Palm Beach. What exactly is this really supposed to prove? The answer is absolutely nothing. Because again, this is not a bombshell. It is already a well-known fact that Trump and Epstein were friendly with each other back in the 1990s. The part that they are not reporting, the part that they seem to miss, is that there was a very well-documented falling out between Trump and Epstein long before he finally got busted in 2018 to 2019 or whatever it was. In fact, this actually dates back several decades to essentially when Trump found out he was a creep. Not only was he one of the key figures who helped bring down Epstein in the investigation there, going all the way back to 2009, but even then on top of that, on the 2016 campaign trail, before Epstein had been fully nailed by the federal government, you had Trump outwardly going out there, speaking out against Epstein and basically warning the world of what was going to come. So again, they're painting all of this as a bombshell when indeed there is no bombshell here. So here's some of the evidence throughout the years, just so we understand.
Bill Clinton.
Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
One more question on that document, and this goes to the more salacious rumors, but I would like you to just, whatever you can say on it. Obviously, our current president has had relationships with Epstein in the past, and there are those, Katie Johnson and maybe other victims who accuse Trump of being involved in things like this. In my experience, Trump supporters will not listen to anything along those lines. Obviously, we're not a court of law here right now, but are those claims, though that case was dropped, it was dropped before it went to court. In your opinion as a lawyer and your experience, is there anything you can say as to the validity of those claims, or whether or not there will be any more about that?
Nothing at all. The only thing that I can say about President Trump is that he is the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas on a lot of people, or at least gave notice to some pretty connected people that I wanted to talk to them, he is the only person who picked up the phone and said, let's just talk. I'll give you as much time as you want. I'll tell you what you need to know, and was very helpful in the information that he gave, and gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved in anything untoward whatsoever, but had good information that checked out and that helped us, and that we didn't have to take a deposition of him.
And that was in 2009?
That was in 2009. So,
do you know if there's any truth to James Patterson's claims that Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago?
I've definitely heard that.
Yeah.
I definitely heard that. And I don't know that it was Trump himself as opposed to a manager there.
Trump's club, so
yeah,
people credit him.
I've heard the rumor that Epstein was kicked out of there for allegedly trying to pick up somebody's daughter or something like that. But I think I did chase that down as far as I could, and never was able to confirm it, but I heard it.
Oh, but your big bombshell is they were friends or friendly, at least with each other, loosely, in the 1990s and early 2000s. And then they had a huge falling out because it turns out Trump found out Epstein was a creep. And look, here's my stance on this issue has always been the same, is that I don't think that there is a quote-unquote cover-up in the sense that, and we'll actually get into the Wall Street Journal here today, that, Trump is implicated in the Epstein Files, therefore that's why this whole mess is coming. I think it's actually a byproduct of Pam Bondi essentially selling something she could not deliver, right? Kind of, falsely answering or misanswering that question about the client list that I've long reiterated I don't think exists in 2025. I think if there was some type of grand conspiracy, as I've said before, if there was this whole thing going on, if there was blackmail, I think it's fully plausible. At the same time, if you're truly to believe there was this crazy conspiracy and Epstein was implicating many powerful people, that likely, if that evidence ever existed, it probably was destroyed, at least initially, and if not initially, later on down the line under, say, for instance, the Biden presidency. So again, I think this, I've reiterated, I think this issue is a problem of miscommunication rather than it being some type of intentional or malicious cover-up by the administration. But obviously people believe what they're going to believe. Some people are just totally adamant, no, it's all a big cover-up, he's in the files, whatever. Okay, so with all of that said, let us get into this hit piece here by the Wall Street Journal, and we're going to go piece by piece, kind of establishing what we already have. Again, Epstein and Trump, it's well known, had a personal relationship, and that personal relationship fell apart. But of course, this is their big bombshell. The Justice Department told Trump in May that his name is among many in the Epstein files. Bondi also told the president at the meeting that the Justice Department, confirming here it was indeed Pam Bondi's decision, not necessarily even Trump's, decided not to release more Jeffrey Epstein documents because of the presence of CP, right, child blankography, and the need to protect victims. So with that said, let us actually read you the story here. So, when Justice Department officials reviewed what Attorney General Pam Bondi called a, quote, truckload of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein earlier this year, again reiterating the fact that Trump's name already was in the previously released Epstein files. It's documented he took Epstein's plane once from, I believe it was New York to Palm Beach. Never any proof that he went to the island. Never any proof that he was involved in criminal wrongdoing or really anything suspicious. But yes, as a one-time associate of Epstein, yes, they did investigate him. They did question him. He cooperated with the investigation, and they ultimately found nothing. And then it was under his presidency that Epstein got nailed. right? This is what they're trying to make into the bigger story. So with all of that in mind, okay, so in May, Bondi and her deputy informed the president at a meeting in the White House that his name was in the Epstein files, the official said. But it's worth noting here, right? This is where, when you have leakers or alleged leakers, they never tell the full story in context. This was not a 911 call to like, hey, your name's in the files. What do we do about this? It's a crisis. No. It was a briefing in which he was informed that many other high-profile figures were also named. Trump was told. The Wall Street Journal further goes on here to note in their own words, let me highlight this especially, being mentioned in the records is not a sign of wrongdoing. Okay, because people are basically making this misnomer where, oh, Trump's name was in the huge files of the greater investigation, therefore he's on the client list that still to this day there's no evidence actually exists in 2025, right? No, that's not the case. His name is in the files, but in what context? Well, let's go on here to state this was not, again, some type of crisis management situation. In the words of the Wall Street Journal, this is what they're framing as a hit piece. The officials said it was a routine briefing that covered a number of topics and that Trump's appearance in the documents was not the focus. So in other words, this is a meeting about what's in the Epstein files, briefly mentioned your name is in them in some regards, but here's the greater conversation, here's what's going on. Obviously implicating there that this was not a big deal, internally speaking, for a reason. They told the president at the meetings that the files contained what officials had felt was unverified hearsay about many people, including Trump. Let me read that again. Unverified hearsay. That is the big bombshell who had socialized with Epstein in the past, some of the officials said. One of the officials familiar with the documents said they contain hundreds of other names. They also told Trump, notably here, that senior Justice Department officials did not plan to release any more documents related to the investigation of the sex offender because the material contained child pornography and victims' personal information, the officials said. So this is, of course, actually consistent with the reason they've said thus far that they're not going to release whatever the rest of the Epstein files are. Okay, so even their big bombshell here is, aligning the same story there. No, there's just sensitive info that they don't want to see released. Trump said at the meeting, notably here, Trump said at the meeting he would defer to the Justice Department's decision to not release any further files. So in other words, this is not a story about how Trump knew he was in the files and he was like, oh, shoot, they got me, therefore don't release it. According to their hit piece, this is their leaker information. No, Trump indeed deferred to the judgment of Bondi and Justice saying, okay, this is your issue. This is what you guys know how to do. I'm going to let you handle the rest of this, right? Clearly, because why? He was not scared of how this went one way or the other. So again, that's why I note, even in their own supposed hit piece here, they're talking about unverified hearsay. They're noting that no evidence of wrongdoing, and they're even going so far as to state, no, Trump did not intentionally cover up or request that this stuff not be released. He did what? Deferred to the judgment of the Justice Department. Now, those who want transparency could say that the judgment of DOJ is wrong. And, I've stated, I think things that do not include CP and obviously sensitive witness info should be released. We don't necessarily know how much of that there actually is, first of all, right? Because they could be telling the truth that that's the majority of what's left. I've also stated, by the way, even before the Trump administration sued to do it, the grand jury testimony, the original affidavits, that's also something that ought to be released. But going, further beyond that, it's like, okay, well, how, so people say, oh, release the list. How do you know the list exists, right? Because now we've had two administrations that have both said there's no list, okay? Again, I've stated I genuinely don't believe there is one. Because even if there was, I truly believe global elites who are supposedly that powerful that they could cover high-profile crimes like this likely would be smart enough in some way to destroy that kind of evidence, right? But again, you can believe what you want to believe. I'm just pointing out here that even their own hit piece is undermining the narrative of an actual cover-up. So that said, the meeting set the stage for high-profile review to come to an end. So this was basically supposed to be like the end of it. Bondi had said in February that Epstein's client list, she misspoke here, obviously, was sitting on my desk right now to review, right? Trump said last week in response to a journalist question that Bondi had not told him his name was in the files. And so, people are going to say, oh, well, that's the big bombshell. It's like, okay, it was also a private conversation. I mean, I don't know, right? And by the way, actually having now sat and listened to the original answer that Trump gave to this. It's worth noting he was outside. They were about to board Marine One. It's really loud out. You can barely hear the reporters. They asked him a question about Epstein, and he says, no, and then proceeds to basically give an answer, his own answer, explaining it, right? It's not so. Like, I know people can take it in a certain context, but to me, this is not even him necessarily sitting down and saying explicitly, like, no, my name was not in the files. No, this meeting never happened. No, he's kind of just giving the answer he wants to give, essentially, in this case, and sort of shutting down, it would seem, right, the talk around him and Epstein, not even necessarily like this moment itself. But I don't know. Here you go. Take a listen. You can see for yourself what I'm talking about in terms of, again, the context of actually watching the clip that's being referred to here.
The Attorney General briefed you on the DOJ and FBI review, the findings of that review. The Attorney General briefed you on that.
What? On the
DOJ and FBI
on what?
review.
On what subject?
Epstein.
Okay.
On Epstein, of the review of the files. Attorney General Pam Bondi.
A very quick briefing.
Did she tell you, what did she tell you about the review? And specifically, did she tell you at all that your name appeared in the file?
No. She's given us just a very quick briefing. And in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen, and I would say that, these files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden we went through years of that with the Russia hoax, with all of the different things that we had to go through. We've gone through years of it, but she's handled it very well. And it's going to be up to her. Whatever she thinks is credible, she should release. Yeah.
On Texas, how many more seats do you want the Republicans to?
So again, you can take that statement any way you want. He says, no, it's loud outside. Probably referring to also addressing, because there's just confusion between what is the Epstein list and the Epstein files. It's not the same thing. I don't know. But again, okay, so you can have that. You can take it as you want, but just for context there, just so people understand, that is the no answer that's being referred to. A quick no before he goes on to explain what happened, right? Trying to answer a reporter he can barely hear because it's super loud out. So, I don't know. Just take that as you will. Anyways, continuing on here with the article. Again, even their own reporting here of the meeting does not really show that anything was bad or they thought was wrong or a big deal about any of this, right? So essentially, there you have it. They also note here that the FBI does not typically disclose materials that are not related to a charged offense. So essentially, their sort of reason why some of this stuff has not actually been released thus far, and by the way, why judges are blocking it, is basically the claim that, hey, if you release things that are unverified hearsay in their own words that could be defamatory, major billionaires could sue the government for a lot of money. Again, that's their side of the story. Okay, whatever you want to say about it. Again, though, worth noting on top of that, the statement, which was unsigned, it said that much of the material would have been sealed in a trial to protect victims and to block the dissemination of CP, right? So that's at least what they're saying. As I said, I think the biggest criticism to be had of the administration through this is the conflict in messaging, right? Bondi says there's a list. And when she's actually responding to a question asking about the list, she says it's on my desk. She doesn't clarify. She's talking about files, not a list. Then it brings this huge uproar. And then you have this stuff with Axios. Yeah, that's all objectively a mess. I'm not denying any of that. But at the same time, I think it's also an extent to which this stuff is being used in bad faith rather than, his name is in the files or, there's proof that he did something here. Because even their hit piece here is not really claiming that's the case. So White House Communications Director Stephen Chung is replying that, quote, this is another fake news story, just like the previous story by Wall Street Journal. In a statement to the Journal on Friday, Bondi and her Deputy General, Todd Blanche, said nothing in the files warranted further investigation or prosecution. They went on here to state that, quote, as part of our routine briefing, we made the president aware of the findings. Again, people can say they're lying about this. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I mean, honestly, who knows, right? Again, my take, believe what you believe, my take is not necessarily that they're lying. I think it's that genuinely there's not really a lot of evidence still remaining in 2025. And again, if you really want to get to the bottom of this, maybe do a new special counsel investigator. I'd be fine with that, right? Who knows what they're really going to find or get to the bottom of. But, That's basically kind of where I stand. But again, you can believe they're lying. You can believe Bondi's covering up to Trump. You can believe Trump's covering up all this stuff. I'm just reacting to what the Wall Street Journal themselves right now are saying. On Tuesday, Blanche said on X that the DOJ was seeking to arrange a meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell in the coming days to discuss any more possible information about anyone who has committed crimes with Epstein. So that is obviously, right, good news. We know the story there behind Maxwell. And so we go on here to say, right, FBI Director Kash Patel has apparently privately told other government officials that Trump's name had appeared in the files. Again, missing the context of what, where, and how did they appear in the files, right? Because again, we already know. We've already known. Again, this is not a story. You've already known his name's in the files. But here you go further. Patel declined to answer an inquiry from the Journal about the Epstein case, but said in a statement that the memo on the Justice Department website explaining why the department wouldn't release more Epstein documents was, quote, consistent with the thorough review conducted by the FBI and the DOJ. So supposedly there's this conflict internally between Patel and Bondi, at least publicly speaking. Patel is in line with Bondi here, saying there's nothing else besides CP and sensitive witness info of any significant degree that really can be released. So that's, again, I'm just telling you what they're saying. Details of Bondi's meeting with Trump had not been previously reported, as you know. It goes on here to say, right, we obviously talked about the grand jury testimony. Again, that is something I would like to see. That is something I think really ought to be released. So anyways, there you essentially have it, right? There's just more coverage here of the story. It talks about Pam Bondi and the Dan Bongino alleged clash to be had there, but really nothing all that noteworthy after that. Of course, as Real American points out here, the Wall Street Journal purposely made the Trump stuff behind a paywall, true, so the people would only see the thing in the headline. That's also true, right? Because when you actually read this article, it's like, okay, what's the bombshell? What's interesting about it, right? The article admits a bunch of other names are in the documents and they didn't think it was credible and believed it was BS. And that includes the other names, by the way. Okay? Potentially people like, let's say Gates, Clinton. I don't have insider, but that could be a name in there, right? Potentially. And in that regard, like they just basically thought, oh, this was just not really substantiated, I guess, on any level. Again, that's just the investigation here, right? Greg Price here also further notes out, if you actually read past the sensationalist headline, which you have to go through the paywall, it says the following, is not a sign of wrongdoing, unverified hearsay about many people, including Trump. And here's my take about all of it, right? You can believe the administration is lying. You can believe they're covering up for Trump. But if there really was something substantial in here that ever proved that Trump was involved in some type of crimes with Epstein, wouldn't you at least think that considering they went after him for his business records, right, his accounting or something like that, in New York, they did all these civil lawsuits, even including civil lawsuits for sexual assault, right? Considering the 4 indictments, several charges, dozens of them that they threw against him. Don't you think this would be something maybe perhaps to throw out there, And honestly, of all the cases, this might have been something that genuinely could tank Trump's 2024 election bid. So then why did the Biden administration never release this stuff either? Because, again, very likely the administration is telling the truth about this. You have some unverified hearsay in it, right? Nothing, substantial. But then on top of that, notably, there is no solid evidence of wrongdoing, hence why there's nothing really to be found here in this regard. So that's my take on it. Again, believe what you believe. But there you have it. That is essentially the Wall Street Journal's big bombshell hit piece. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for, again, repeating information that we already know. Yes, Trump is in the files. Yes, we've known that. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. What do you think? Do you agree with my take? Or do you disagree? Do you think, oh, he's clearly, he was involved in Epstein and all that stuff? Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.